And just like that, it's another Monday morning and we are live.
It is, and it's Memorial Day Monday morning. Happy Memorial Day, brother.
You too, sir. A lot
So,
of confusion around Memorial Day. I'll hear people like, oh, thank you for your service. And that's not what
yeah,
Memorial Day is for.
exactly right. And I'll admit I fell into that for a while. As you know, I did not serve, and it took me a while to get my small, feeble brain wrapped around that. And of course, the reminder that's out there on Facebook, and it's a good one, is too many people. eh, There's a real reason for a 3-day weekend. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you see the pictures. The one that always gets me are the Omaha Beach. Their day at the beach, so you can enjoy your day at the beach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting. Omaha Beach was a slaughter, but in relative terms compared to some of the ones that the Marines faced, and maybe I'm biased, but I mean, you can look at the stats.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the day, Omaha Beach, you could have a picnic out there. It was over.
Yeah.
Whereas, Iwo Jima, 30 something days later,
Mm-hmm.
people were still getting killed on the beach.
Yep. And piece of family history for me, right above my computer here is a knife that was at Guadalcanal and Iwo.
No kidding. From who?
Yep. My grandfather, Marine.
No kidding. On your
Yep.
mom's side or your dad's side?
Mom's side.
Mom's side. Nice.
Yep. Grandfather on the dad's side he was in Europe. Never talked about it much. Don't really know for sure what
Mm-hmm.
he did, but pulled Grandpa Pete's records a number of years back, and he was Mr. Rules follower later in life. Turned out not so much as a younger man. We found out that he bolted out of Marine boot camp for a family emergency, and when they wouldn't give him leave, he just left
Whoa.
and hopped trains from the West Coast back to Iowa, took care of whatever the family emergency was. It escapes me at the moment, and then hopped trains back and stood captain's mast and took his punishment.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a buddy like that. Eric, if you're watching, Semper Fi, brother. Yeah, man, you can either give Eric leave or he's going to take it.
Yeah.
And he was a phenomenal Marine. Otherwise, he was high shooter at a sniper school, got the Purple Heart during Desert Storm. But, he's like, I need to take leave. My brother's sick. And his brother ultimately passed away from that thing. And the Marine Corps, of course, being the Marine Corps, is like, absolutely not. Tell your brother to drink water and take a knee and take some Motrin.
Get some fresh
And he's
socks,
like, yeah.
right?
He's like, Roger that. I'm going to get on my motorcycle. I'll come back when it's over. And he did.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
like you said, he got court-martialed and moved on. But look who we got on the show, Brother Will.
We have a quorum of Wills. We have Will Rhodes on. And let's just pretend I need these to see the coin number. Coin number 2269 from Missouri. We got Will Parker on from Montana. Good to see you, brother. Don Bothwell, coin number 2270 from the great state of Montana. And what's this coin number thing, brother?
It's funny you should ask. The American Warrior Society is a coined member community of like-minded individuals, people that are focused on self-preservation, self-defense in these trying times that we currently live in. It has everything you need to keep yourself and your family safer, whether it comes to tactical trauma casualty care. We have Dr. Dan Nikki, a SWAT doc, an ER physician, teaching everything you need to know to keep your family safe. We also have white belt to blue belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We have carbine, shotgun, rifle, handgun, you name it, edge weapons. My God, man, everything you need. It's right there in the training vault. Please take a 14-day free test drive. And if you're unhappy, let me know. I'll let you out. Not a problem. Easy day.
Yep.
So we got a great show, man. I was kind of looking through it. I loved your analysis, but I like, I don't like the conclusion at the end, but I think it's a reasonable one to come to. So before we get into that, if I could say one last time, thank you to those that made the ultimate sacrifice. My great friends. I'll just name some of the ones that I love dearly that gave their life. All of them died in Iraq. I think all of them died in 2005. That just shows you what a meat grinder 2005 was. Gunnery Sergeant Terry Ball, one of my best friends. Jeremiah Savage, a young man I had the pleasure of putting in the Marine Corps. Morgan Strader, Brad McCormick, Richard Palmer, TJ Elliott, and I'm sure I'm forgetting folks, but they are not with their families today. They're with their Lord, and I look forward to seeing you guys someday.
Yeah, it's hard to sum up in words what that sacrifice really means, and it's easy to forget in the day-to-day humdrum of life, right? So it's good to take a pause and take a quiet moment today and think about those folks.
Yeah, and that when you're having a bad day, just remember those Marines, sailors, airmen, whatever. I mean, the soldiers, they don't get to have that bad day. I'm sure
Yeah,
they would love to have your bad day. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yep.
So please like and hit that
Sure.
share button. We got a great show for you today. Thanks as always to Mr. Will Wood.
Well, I thank you for those kind words, brother. Just doing my bit here for everybody. And I just realized the epic failure this morning. I didn't have time to correct. And that is I forgot to put in the CNN Fear Greed Index. So I'm not sure how we will continue on without an update from CNN. But it is currently at 64, which is down slightly, still in the greed territory. We'll see what happens. Apparently, some deal got struck with Europe. I just saw the headline this morning. I didn't. So, Trump postponed the tariffs till July 9th or something like that. So
Yeah, the
I'm
50%
sure,
tariffs on Europe.
yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
the European stock market will jump tomorrow morning, and we'll move more into the greed side of that. Would be my guess. Um, but this is the back and forth, of Trump. And I was actually just commenting to my beautiful bride here a couple nights ago. On Friday I unloaded I had some ETFs that triple leverage the market one direction or the other. And with Trump in office, I don't hold those over a weekend anymore because you just don't know what's going to happen.
No.
So everything can be looking good on Friday, and come Monday morning, it's like, oh, I should have sold that. So that's the trading account, guys. That's not investing. That's me playing the stock market casino. So certainly not advocating, everybody put all their money into something like that. That's a fun account. It goes back and forth dramatically.
Yeah.
So
Tony is on, Brian is on, Michael is on, my good friend Chad Ray is on. Good morning, brother.
Awesome. Good to see you guys.
So let's
All right.
get a review going here.
Yeah. So just a quick review because we've covered a lot of territory in the last couple of weeks. So this one's part 3. I called this one the reaction. So this would be the reaction to the economic downturn. So in part 1 of this melt up series, we called it the setup, the history of the system, how the Federal Reserve works, how the monetary system works, that inflation is not a bug, it is a feature, it's how it's designed to work. And eventually the system will fail because every monetary system, especially the ones that become the world reserve currency, they all fail. It's just the way it is. And we just kind of go from one failure to another. And I know I've talked about it before. We've discussed it. Ray Dalio's, oh gosh, it just jumped out of my head. It's about a 35-minute cartoonish thing that Dalio commentates on or narrates on YouTube. Principles of the Changing World Order, I believe it's called.
If I can find it, I'll throw it in the comments. Okay,
that'd be awesome. That's well worth your time, guys, because it's history just repeats over and over, and it'll repeat for America too. Don't know when. Could well not be in our lifetimes, but the system still works the way it does.
Yep.
And the reason it always works the way it does is because humans are involved. So the goals of our modern Fed are full employment and stable prices. Full employment is subjective. There is the unemployment rate must be this, that, or the other thing. Typically speaking, 4% of unemployment and under is considered full employment. There's always going to be some people that become unemployed at any given time for any number of reasons. And then stable prices. Stable prices does not mean zero inflation. It means their inflation target, which is 2%, which means the value of your currency is going to get the purchasing power of your currency is going to get cut in half every 36 years, guaranteed if they hit their target. And if inflation runs above that, it's going to be less time. And next week, we're going to get into how to protect yourselves during all this. So we will talk quite a bit next week about that.
And I have found it, Will. It's Principles of the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. I think it's 43 minutes. That's right here. Please check it out when we're done today.
Yes, well worth your time. In fact, I rewatch that occasionally.
Yeah.
Just because I'm one of those cool kids like that. Part 2, which was last week, we did the downturn. Eventually, there will be another economic downturn, and in putting together today's show notes, I really got to think about we don't really do recessions anymore. Back in the 70s and 80s, we would do a recession and it would happen, right?
That's become so gauche at this point. Come on, man.
It is. It's so late 1900s. But we don't do that anymore. And I don't know if it's the population, the people have changed where we won't eat a recession anymore. We won't eat any bad times. Um,
We need to.
but because what happens, like look at the housing crisis. That should have been a depression, really.
Hmm.
Um, but they just printed their way out of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, the same thing. COVID should have been a depression. I mean, the first 2 years of the 2 week shutdown are always the worst, right?
Mhm.
Um, that should have been one, and we papered over that. We're going to dig into that today and look at the responses to those downturns. So we really have more shocks to the system now. I mean, think about the housing crisis, the great financial crisis, global financial crisis, depending on which term you like. That should have brought the whole banking system down. We're going to get into that a little bit today about the reaction to that. And part of this is also increased retail activity in markets as far as the market measurement of a downturn. Um, and this is something I've started studying for my own stuff is with more retail activity, that's guys like me and you with a Robinhood account or a Fidelity account or a Schwab or whoever you choose. People jump in and out of the market more. Levered ETFs, like I talked about. A
You don't
lot of
recommend Robinhood, do you? Just
I
out of
don't.
curiosity.
No, I
Why?
don't actually.
Is there a reason for
Um,
that?
I just don't really care for their platform or how they do business very much.
Yeah,
So,
what they did to the guys at GameStop showed
yep,
their true
yep.
colors.
Well, and just to do a segue on that, yes, they stopped the trading on that for sure.
Yep.
And so, do you happen to recall, or if anybody else recalls, who championed the bailout of the hedge funds when they got caught on the wrong side of the GameStop trade?
Who?
Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Oh my God.
She's
Pocahontas? Are you freaking
yes,
kidding me?
she was out there talking about how we've got to do something about these poor hedge funds that are caught on the wrong side of the GameStop shorts. She was screaming it from the rooftops.
That's
Didn't get covered much, but
wow. I had no
let me
idea.
guess who her campaign contributors were.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
that
it's
was
the system.
I don't
Yep.
know. That's criminal in my opinion. But anyway, Will
Absolutely.
Parker says, I left the job market more than 11 years ago. I am not, nor will I be in the unemployment number. And Brian
Right.
Schuler is on from a stormy, wet North Texas. Stay safe out there, my friend.
Yep. I see Mark's up there from Canada as well. Good to see you, sir.
Hey,
And Tony's on as well. Good morning, Tony. So the all this retail activity typically increases a lot more volatility, but this last dip, it was funny, Rich. You know who the buyer was this last time the market dipped after the tariffs? It
mm-mm.
was retail, big
Really?
time.
Oh, that's
Yes.
right. Everybody's buying the dip. You're
Yes.
absolutely right.
Everybody's buying the dip. The hedge funds, the institutional money, they were getting out and shorting the market. And all the retail investors came in and they've been well conditioned to buy the dip.
Mhm.
And they powered this market back up. It's a very interesting dichotomy because in the past it was always retail that would panic and jump out at the bottom, and this time it was just the opposite. So, very interesting change in behavior. We'll see if eventually it bites them in the rear end. Um, so we're looking at these past reactions today to try to get an idea of what future reactions may be to get prepared for them. We're going to talk about those preparations next week in part 4. And let's face it, humans tend to do what works until it fails spectacularly, right?
Yes.
Look at the lead up to the housing crisis. The answer
Oh,
to
yeah.
everything was buy more houses
Mhm.
until it failed spectacularly,
Mhm.
right?
Who was
That's
that guy
human
that was
history.
talking about buying Lehman Brothers while he was having that conversation with
I
Mark?
don't recall.
Yeah, he was like, Lehman just fell to 80, $35 a share.
Hmm.
Are you going to buy more? Like, yeah, why wouldn't it? And he said, well,
Mm,
since we've been talking, it fell. Now it's $17 a share. What do you think now?
yeah,
It's
yeah, and that part of that story was true from what I understand.
yeah,
From the
sunk
big short,
cost
yeah.
fallacy. That's
Yep,
an easy cognitive bias. You got to know when to cut bait, man.
absolutely. And it's it's hard to change perceptions and people. What was the one we had at the end of the show a couple weeks ago? Don't hang on to a mistake because you spent a long time making it or
Hmm.
whatever that was. And we
Hmm.
all fall into that. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's
That's going back to my show, the Across the Peak podcast I did with Justin Carroll. We did a one like I sifted through all the cognitive biases, and there's potentially hundreds. I don't remember. It just like these are the top 10 that's going to get your ass in trouble. And one of them, one of the top three was that sunk cost fallacy. You know, I put so much effort into making this mistake.
Yep.
How can I backpedal now? Because my credibility is on the line.
Yep.
I maybe me and that brand have connected in a way where I feel,
yeah,
Nike, man, Nike is what I do. Like, but Nike stock is going in the toilet, but whatever.
They'll come back. They always have.
Yeah, right? Until they don't.
Yep. Exactly. Thank goodness none of us or anyone watching this morning could ever fall into any of those fallacies.
No. Nope. And that's what everybody said. Like, well, Rich, I don't do that. When I did the show and was promoted, like, yeah, that don't happen to me. And I'm like,
right.
Whoa, oh my God.
Yep. And it's funny we get, and especially I think social media makes it worse because it's easy to find a group somewhere that agrees with you and then just listen to that group. Which of course is another fallacy.
Look at this comment from Michael.
Yes.
Is he right? I mean, that's
absolutely.
Spot on.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and especially, we got Jake Tapper writing books about stuff now. I'm like, hold on. Was it Jon Stewart? I can't believe I'm going to quote Jon Stewart.
Called him out.
Referring to Jake Tapper, so you're writing a book for something that was supposed to be news back when you were doing news.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to pay for it now. Yeah, it just drives me bananas. I've gotten to the point I've just turned most of that junk off because I just end up angry.
I know, man. Alan Kelly is on. Ted Leonard says his coin number 1461. Thanks for the show. Thank you for being on today, sir.
Yes, thank you. So let's go back. Let's go back in the way back machine. Look at pre-GFC here. You'll note the date on this, May 17th of 2007. Happy times at that time, but there were paranoid people going, hey, there's something not quite right here, right? Can you read this one off to us?
Yeah, man. The subprime. Now, this is according to, I guess this is a Bernanke quote. Is that what we're led to believe here?
It is. Sorry, I forgot to put the attribution in there. This is from an article from Fortune. This is
okay. So the subprime mess is grave, but largely contained, said Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke Thursday in a speech before the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. While rising delinquencies and foreclosures will continue to weigh heavily on the housing market this year, it will not cripple the U.S. economy, he said. The speech was the chairman's most comprehensive on the subprime mortgage issue to date. Wow.
Yeah. How'd that turn out?
That one did not age well, did it?
So, and I'll also remind you that after they printed a whole bunch of money and cut rates to zero, all of which we're going to dig into here today for the subprime mess, there were a lot of interviews and congressional testimony where Bernanke, remember the old green shoots talking point? I see green shoots in the economy as things are starting to grow.
I forgot about that. Yes.
And he came out later and went, yeah, that was just jawboning. I was just making that stuff up to try and get people to feel better, to feel confident to go contribute to the economy. He was like, it was just, I just made it up.
But the emotional component is incredibly real. Yes. But at some point, it becomes a math problem. You can take emotion out of it, right? But the trick is to know when.
Exactly.
Rubicon, right?
Yep. And that's the timing of it, right? Yeah. I mean, math wise, we know exactly which way this system's going. Yeah. Math wise, we know exactly where we are with national debt.
Mm-hmm.
Math wise, we know exactly what's going to happen with interest rates.
Yeah.
The problem is the when. Math wise, we knew exactly what was going to happen with the housing market at some point. But if you went too early, like Dr. Michael Burry did, right? Mm-hmm. He went too early on the short, and he was within 90 days of going bankrupt instead of being a folk legend.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
So, it's timing matters. Ask anybody who bought a house in 2006.
Yeah. Ted's crushing it today. Will, what's he saying?
Right, what do we got here? We got, he says, Bernanke.
You don't need those glasses. Come on.
Yes,
man.
I do. Yeah. And it's funny, you start using them and then your eyes get, the muscles start to weaken even more. And now it's just, my granny glasses, as my daughter calls them. I like to give her the dad look every now and then. Bernanke wrote celebrated stuff on what went wrong in the 1929, 1930 with the Great Depression. And then in 2008 did the same thing. Yep. He sure did. And, it goes back to that in fairness to Bernanke, Greenspan, even Powell, if they go too early and happen to be wrong, then they're going to be pariahs, right?
Uh-huh.
But if they wait, this word Powell, I think the crutch Powell uses is we're going to be data dependent. Well,
Uh-huh.
that also guarantees you're going to be behind
Uh-huh.
because that data is always backward looking. You can't look at future data, right? So you
Uh-huh.
can only look at past data, and then guarantees the Fed's always going to be behind. And if I can go off on a tangent for a moment, this is where Trump is doing a good job of backing Powell into a corner
Uh-huh.
because the whole too late Powell thing, he's trying to get Powell to drop rates, which it will stimulate the economy. I think more importantly to Trump is the he needs the rates lower to refinance the maturity wall that we talked about, all this national debt that's coming due this year. He needs
Uh-huh.
lower rates. So Trump's actually doing a really good job, a little nefarious, backing Trump into a corner to lower rates when he doesn't really want to, because by doing this whole too late Powell thing, if he ends up too late again, which he will, these are data dependent,
Yeah.
he makes Powell look bad. That
Uh-huh.
tarnishes his legacy. If Powell cuts rates too soon, he risks being Arthur Burns 2.0.
Uh-huh.
And then we get the inflation of the 70s all over again, leading probably to stagflation. So Trump's backing Powell into a corner here. He can
Yeah.
stand up for it, and then when he's too late, he'll take the blame. And if he goes too early, he'll take the blame.
I did a show on the economy. I think it was right before you and I started doing our show. So this would be early 2000. And I'm like, at some point, stagflation is coming. I don't know if it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be a year from now, 10 years. It's just, the writing is on the wall.
Yep.
Unless they cook the books, which is some of the things that we're going to talk about, whether you paper and overshit with TARP or
Mm-hmm.
QE1 Infinity, et cetera. But Eric is on. So is Greg. Good morning, gentlemen. TC Fuller, our good friend, says sitting on the beach with toes in the sand will catch the replay when I have a better connectivity. Be well.
Good. Well, make sure to watch in the morning because you can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning, and we'll get you
Amen.
there, brother. So,
Mm-hmm.
so let's look at the Fed's reaction to the global financial crisis, housing crisis, whichever term you like. So overall, it's just money printer go brr. We're going to print a lot of money here. Okay. But it was different than COVID, and we're going to dig into that. So it started with TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program, a whole $700 billion, just chump change, really. Went to QE1. We're going to dig into these a little bit. You got QE2, quantitative easing, which is money printing. And you had QE Infinity. It was actually originally termed QE3. We're going to get into why it was called QE Infinity. And then Operation Twist. It's where they bought different bonds. So TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program. October 2008, a whole $700 billion. And we're going to also look at these numbers as a percentage of GDP. And I think that's important to do because the GDP changes, gross domestic product. Think of it as your household income, if you will, for the country. That's not a perfect analogy, but it gets us in the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I had $10,000 in debt and the family was making $100,000 a year, that's manageable. But if it's $10,000 in debt and we're making $20,000 a year as a household, that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think it's important to look at this as a percentage of GDP as we go along.
Agree.
Okay. George W. Bush famously said he had to abandon the free market system to save the free market system. Complete capitulation.
Yes.
And this was to save the banks and keep something worse from happening. The problem is you have talked about quite a bit, Rich. Emphatically, this was moral hazard, right? Why should these banks not take on unnecessary risk when they know they're just going to get bailed out? As the saying goes, we believe in capitalism until we lose money, and then we believe in socialism. Right.
It's funny when I was reading through your thing, I had forgotten that Bush 2.0 is the one that did TARP that got it signed. I blamed Obama for that for some reason. I guess because it really was more on his watch where it was kind of done, but it was enacted.
Yep.
And the first STEMI checks in my lifetime that's ever been sent out were sent out by Bush, which every time I look more into his 8 years as president, he falls further down the rankings for me.
Yes.
He grew government, which I'm completely against. He grew it maybe the largest since FDR, maybe the largest ever growth
Mhm.
of the government, put us in debt to our up to and beyond our eyeballs.
Yep.
When I believe the Clintons gave us a surplus. I hate to say that out loud, but it's somewhat true.
Mhm.
And then the stimmy checks, TARP, and creating this where the banks have zero moral hazard. They can do whatever the hell they
Yep.
want, make all the bad decisions you want. Daddy's coming in with the checkbook to save you.
That's it. That's it.
Unacceptable.
It's the irresponsible frat boy with daddy's platinum card, right?
That's right.
The only thing I'll throw out there on the Clinton thing, because I followed politics even more closely back then. Let's not forget the first 2 years of Clinton, 92 to 94. That's when, remember, Hillary Care.
Oh
They
yeah.
wanted single payer health care, very, very far left. It was Newt Gingrich and the Republican Revolution in 94 that drug Clinton back to the center. And I'll give Clinton credit. He's a very astute politician. He figured out which way the wind was blowing from, and he moved back to the center.
Yeah.
It was the fiscal responsibility of the Republicans then, if only we could go back to that, along with Clinton's persona and charisma that brought all that together for him. So
I hate to say it, those are pretty good 8 years.
they really were. They
I
really
hate
were.
to
But,
say it.
you know, so put a few other things in context too. The internet was brand new. So you had a brand new technology coming on, spurring all kinds of economic growth. Also, oil was $15 a barrel, which sure helps.
Wow. Yes.
So, yeah, I've done a lot of digging into why were those years good. And it's, you know, every president suffers from or enjoys the luck of the timing.
Yeah. And I was in my 30s and my kids were young. My career
Yep.
was going great. My stocks were going great. Everything
Yep.
was good.
Yep. And if we're fair about it, there was a lot less information for us to take in back then too.
Man, that's true.
Right? You didn't have access to what was really happening until it
I had
just
a paper
blindsided
on my
you.
hip and things were good.
Yeah, absolutely. So after TARP, we get quantitative easing one, QE1, November 2008, a whole, 3 months later, 2 months later, whatever it was there, $1.25 trillion. Still pretty much chump change compared to today. 7.4% of GDP. Also, for these GDP numbers, I've just put them all in relationship to 2008 because actually that was the rosy way to look at it because GDP went down after that. So I could have made the numbers look even worse. So this is I'm giving you guys the rosy view here. Okay. And then this money, QE1, only went to banks to provide liquidity. That's another way to keep them solvent, is what it really was. It kept the banks from going bankrupt. That's how bad the banking system got at that point. It's how much trouble they were in. They needed made up printed money to keep them solvent.
Let's talk about this. As a car guy, man, there was some fantastic motorcycle companies and car companies back in the day that we allowed to fail, you know. And it's like, man, they were making great products ahead of their time. But that was back in the America that said, hey, you make a bad call, you're going to have to eat it. And I think we need to go back to that. Are we ever going to go back to that? Probably not. I don't think so. Never.
I don't think so either.
No.
Maybe on a very small scale, you know, some startups, but somebody established, you know, no, there's no way. Not going to let it happen.
No.
So this is QE1. Then we go QE2 about 2 years later. So we made it a whole 2 years there. And if you remember, the economy from 08 to 2010 was not a happy place. Okay. Now, bear in mind, when we're not going to dig too much into this at the side because we're just talking about the monetary side, but interest rates also got cut to zero during this time. So there's that side of it as well. Went from about 6 on the Fed funds rate, somewhere in there, down to 0 in very short order. Okay. So November 2010, we get another $600 billion, which is 3.6% of GDP. You notice each one gets larger.
Yes. Yeah.
And this was all spent on treasury bonds in the second quarter of 2011. All of it. Okay.
Yeah.
So so we went from QE1 where it all went to the banks and went to QE2 where it all went to the federal government. So this was a way for the Federal Reserve to create money to sustain government operations. Now, this does a couple things. It suppressed interest rates because this was the start of the Federal Reserve saying, we want treasury bond yields, interest rates to go down. And the way treasury bonds, new treasury bonds are sold is at an auction. It's an online auction. And people put in their bid. Well, the Fed let it be known that we will come in and basically pay 100% on the dollar for this. It'll basically be a 0% interest rate for short-term treasuries. Well, that if anybody else wanted any of those, they had to put in the same bid. So the Federal Reserve manipulated the interest rate on U.S. Treasury bonds that way. So that suppressed
Somewhere
those.
Dr. Fuller's out there clutching his pearls.
Yes.
They manipulate it.
So this also ensured there would not be a failed auction during this time. Okay. A failed auction is when you don't get enough bidders for those bonds. That's a really bad sign.
You think we would ever let that happen? Not a chance in hell.
No way. Nope. Because that's the sign of a failing monetary system. When nobody wants your debt, that's not a sustainable thing. So the Fed let it be known we will not let a failed auction happen. We're going to come in and buy these, but we're going to buy them at basically a 0% interest rate. So if it's a $100 bond, they're going to pay $100 for it. And so this caused everyone else, if they wanted that guaranteed return of capital, to accept that same lower interest rate. Okay. Now let's also think about the psychology. This is November 2010. People are scared. Yeah. The purchasing actually happened second quarter of 11, but it's the same thing. People just wanted to put their money somewhere where they knew they were going to get it back because they just got burned a whole bunch of times. Right. Yeah. So a lot of fear in the market. People were more than happy to do that. Okay. But the thing was that there were so many bonds being issued to finance the government stimulus at that point that it was outstripping the capacity of institutions and individuals to purchase those bonds.
You don't say.
Yeah, shocking, right? What's Don say there?
Don says, don't forget that the thought process among politicians and financial thinkers was that some banks were, quote, systemically significant institutions, end quote, that had to be bailed out, hence the too big to fail. Yeah, the GSIBs.
Yep,
absolutely. They got a name for them now. And if you're a GSIB, do what the hell you want to do. Nobody cares.
Yeah, not only is there a name for them, there's a law that says that that's how it's going to be handled.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
We've codified
Dodd-Frank. Yeah, Dodd-Frank. That's law. They will be backstopped. So that's where the Basel III endgame comes from. That's the trade-off. They have to abide to the Basel III stuff to keep their GSIB status.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, status.
All right. Did we skip one there, brother? Did we go?
I don't think so. No.
Nope, you didn't. You're on the game. Best cymbal banging monkey in the business, let me tell you. So then that's a good look on you, brother. You should work on that over a couple of cocktails this afternoon.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna take your advice.
All right. So then we get Operation Twist. Now this is one that it took me a little while to wrap my head around. So this was from July 2012 to December 2012. So the Fed couldn't cut rates anymore because they were already at zero, right? So now what are you going to do? Well, if you go negative interest rates, now you get Europe, and that's just pure capitulation. They didn't want to go there. Okay. Then you lose all credibility. You're paying people money. I'm sorry, you're losing money every month if you deposit money somewhere. That's pretty much a failed currency. All right. So what Operation Twist does is it forced the longer term rates down, flatten the curve in the parlance. Let's talk about what this is. So the Fed had a whole lot of short-term bonds that they held, U.S. Treasury bonds that they held. Well, the government was fearful of coming up on the maturity wall, kind of like we're running into now, right? Mm-hmm. So what the Fed did said, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to sell these when these shorter-term bonds come up. We're going to let them expire, and we're going to take that money and we're going to buy long-dated bonds, 20-year plus bonds. And they're going to do the same thing. That artificial demand for those longer-term bonds is going to drive those long-term rates down. Now, let's think about who, what, why, where. The big one is the why. Why does somebody buy a long-term bond? Why do you want to lock your money up for 20-plus years in a U.S. Treasury bond? It's to give yourself some long-term stability, right? Mm-hmm. Well, when let's say those bonds were paying 5%, those I'm just going to call it a 30-year bond, paying 5% interest. Well, suddenly the Fed comes in and buys enough of them to lower that rate to zero. Well, now, why would I lock my money up for 30 years for zero? Well, then what are you going to do with that money? Because all money seeks a yield. Well, maybe you invest in the stock market. Maybe you go buy one of these houses that's 60% off.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you go spend it into the economy. So you see the incentive that they were trying,
Mm-hmm.
they were putting out there. The other thing is, let's say a guy named Rich had a 30-year bond that he bought in 2005. Well, when the Fed comes in and buys the new bonds at 0% interest, that drives up the value, the price of your bond that you bought for $95 or 95 cents on the dollar. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now it's worth more. Well, you can go sell that bond.
Right.
And then what are you going to do with that money? Well, you're not going to put it back into a 0% interest instrument.
You'll put it in the
You're going to
economy.
go do those other things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this was the Fed's way of helping the federal government finance their debt, lock in a not finance it, lock in a lower rate for a longer period of time, and incentivize institutions and individuals to pull their money out of those instruments and put it out in the economy. It was all a big manipulation, just like everything is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This did not, however, expand the Fed's balance sheet because they were letting short-term bonds come due, mature, and refinancing, buying out on the long end of the curve. So some people would maybe say a guy named Rich again would sell his 30-year bond off, take that money, and now maybe only put it into a 1-year bond or a 2-year bond, right? But then, so the market was taking care of financing the short end, and the Fed was taking care of financing the long end. Okay, so
Pretty smart.
it worked. Okay, this is less aggressive than QE because this isn't actually putting money into the banking system. It didn't change the amount of money the Fed had printed to buy treasury bonds. It was manipulating the market.
Right.
Okay, so it's less aggressive than QE, but maybe a little more underhanded because it's not. Most folks don't understand what was happening, and I sure didn't
Right.
at the time. In full disclosure, okay.
It's the first I've heard of Operation Twist, to be candid
Okay.
with you. Yeah.
All right. And you know what? It wasn't the first time they did it.
Oh, really?
The first Operation Twist was in the 60s. And I just learned that yesterday.
Did it work?
No, they didn't.
But
So
they tried it again.
they tried it again. And my guess is in the 60s, there was, as a percentage of GDP, there was so little national debt, it couldn't have the same effect. That's a total guess on my part, guys. But that's,
And we were on the gold standard back then too. That's kind of
True.
probably a little bit different.
It probably, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. So they tried it back then. It didn't work. It certainly worked this time around though. What's Eric say?
Eric, this is a question for you. It says, can you break down what's really going on with bank derivatives? I don't think most people realize just how massive the risk is that's building up behind the scenes. It feels like a ticking time bomb, and the average person has no clue. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Total fear mongering, Eric. Everything's fine. Remain calm. All is well. No. I'll be honest with you. I know a little bit about the bank derivatives. They're building up again. We no longer have credit default swaps. We now have CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. Totally different name. Exact same thing. And
Yeah.
you're right. They are building up. I have not checked back on that part of things in probably 6 months now, so it's due for that. So let me do some checking on that, and we'll do a little thing at the end of next week's show about that.
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. Things are building up again. The excesses are building up because humans.
Well, there's no moral hazard, so why not?
Right. Absolutely. And
Why not
really
blow it up again? Who cares?
It's really easy for some folks, me included at times, to sit back and be like, oh, these bankers. But can you really blame them? I mean, really, I mean, it's no different than a politician or a worker at a certain place. As Charlie Munger said, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome.
100%.
And they are completely incentivized to take these risks. And from a politician's, a policymaker's standpoint, when the banks take these risks and do these things, the economy grows, right? So the policymakers are incentivized to let the bankers do these things. The bankers are incentivized because they make a whole bunch of money with very little downside risk. It's the way the system works right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It
of
is.
my own family. You know, my father, he crashed, I don't know, 6 or 7 cars in high school, and
Mhm.
and his father owned a dealership. So every time my grandfather owned a dealership, so every time he crashed in it, he just got a brand new one,
Mhm.
and he'd crash it again. And they would do. They gave him a personalized license plate. They put his nickname and then number 1, crashed it. Nickname number 2, nickname number 3, and by the time he graduated high school, it was like, Chucky 6, and it's like,
Yeah.
where's the moral hazard in that? You just keep
Right.
giving the kid a brand new car, and he just keeps crashing them.
Yeah. Yep.
And
So
yeah,
it's
so I mean, it speaks to how my father evolved as a man too. You know, that
mhm.
he lived without consequences in a lot of ways.
Yep. And let's think about these bankers too. So they live without these consequences. And so what do they do the next time around? Exact same thing.
Sure, why not?
And hold on a second, where do the politicians go after they're done politicking? They become lobbyists or get on the boards of these places. It's all a vicious circle that we all follow and complain about. And it's just the system. This is where as I've gotten older, I don't really get angry about this anymore. I just go, okay, how do I make money off this for my family?
Good point. Yeah, because
Because
right now the whole thing you told me about Elizabeth Warren coming down on the side of the hedge funds that were shorting GameStop. I mean, they were on the wrong side of it, and they should have ate it.
yeah, yes,
And man,
yep,
oh well.
yeah. You pays you money and it takes you his chances. But the problem is there's just no chances anymore for the big guys.
Yeah,
So
disgusting.
all right, so now we get into QE3. This is September 2012. Remember, this is not a good time. At this point, if my memory serves me correctly, by this point, we were well into some deflation, and the Federal Reserve was very scared, and they went, "Fine, we're going to give her now." Okay. Um, Turned out twist wasn't going to be enough. QE1, QE2, and TARP didn't take care of things. This one got dubbed QE Infinity because there was a major difference between QE1, QE2 as a group, including TARP actually, and QE3. Each one of those other QE's operations had a dollar amount. And I forget what those exact dollar amounts are. It doesn't matter. We're doing this much. This was open ended in that there was no expiration date on this. The Federal Reserve was buying $40 billion a month in mortgage backed securities and $45 billion a month in US Treasuries. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Without a maximum dollar amount to be spent, created, whatever you want to call it. So that's where the infinity thing came from, because it could have gone on for infinity. All right. It went on for just over 2 years, went to October 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Total spent $2.125 trillion. I shouldn't even say spent, created.
God, created.
Okay. That's 12.5% of GDP in 2 years.
These numbers keep getting bigger there. I don't
bingo.
I can check my math.
Okay. And speaking of numbers getting bigger, if you bring Michael's comment up, Paul Ryan talking about politicians going back and forth. He had a SPAC for a while. Oh gosh, Michael, if you remember what SPAC stands for, if you can look it up, brother. You want to talk about total fugazi BS? It was SPACs.
The Ryan Murray bipartisan budget amendment, man, still to this day makes my freaking blood boil. And I tell you, there's only one person that's in my life that's fight on sight is Paul Ryan.
Yeah,
I would love to run into him at NRA show because I'm going to jail. That guy needs his face rearranged.
Yeah,
what a piece of
garbage. It's all part of the same system.
Yeah,
disgusting. And listen, love him, hate him, whatever. Jesse Ventura, pro wrestler, governor of Minnesota, right? He nailed it, and I didn't fully appreciate it at the time, but he nailed it back in the day when he said it's like wrestling. We all go out there, we talk trash about each other, and then we all go hang out at the same parties and we're buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, back in the early 90s, whenever that was, he got into politics, I didn't really fully appreciate what he was saying, but man, I wish the world would have listened to him. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So now we're up to 12.5% of GDP for QE Infinity, right?
Eventually you're going to get real numbers going here, huh? at some point.
Eventually. But if we think about that, it just took more and more and more, right?
Mhm.
So total QE 1, 2, infinity, and I think I threw TARP in there as well when I did this number, we equaled $4.7 trillion of QE in about 4 years. This is all based off 2008 GDP, which was a $16.9 trillion economy. And the economy was still shaky. So let's think about that for a second. If you have a household income of $100,000 a year, and somebody you were in such bad shape, somebody gifted you $28,000 with no taxes on it, and it was still shaky. That what level of irresponsibility has to occur for that situation to develop, and then that much help still has things shaky, right?
But
Now,
see, here's the thing. You always forget this, Will, and I'm going to chastise you again. Your own household doesn't have its own printing press.
Well, funny you mentioned that because there's
it?
this room right back here.
Ah, the room.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's the thing, right? So, and this is also I find it really funny that U.S. Secret Service comes down on counterfeiters like crazy because the idea was always that it would not devalue
the dollar, right?
It would devalue, but also people would lose faith in the dollar if there were fake ones running around. And I'm like, seriously?
That's a crime now?
Yeah. Well, I've got some names for you to go after. There's a Bernanke, there's a Powell, there's a few others as well. Oh, yeah. So we do all this stimmy, create all this money, and it's still shaky. So what else can we do? Anybody got a shovel? Remember the shovel term back in the day?
Shovel ready, is that what you're talking about?
That's it. And Obama famously saying shovel ready wasn't as ready as we thought it was, or however that went, when that moment of candor, right? Well,
these are shovel ready projects. They're just waiting to have. We just need to throw some money at them and watch stuff happen.
Yes, that's what we need. It's exactly what we need. Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. If you can go to the next one there, brother. All right, I'm going to expand this one out. I'm going to put my spectacles on. I tried to piece these together, guys, so bear with me.
Blow it up for y'all too. There we go.
I appreciate that. So this is total debt, total federal debt. We're looking at Q1 of 2008, using round numbers here, $9.4 trillion. Oh, if only we could go back to that, right? And you look at Q3 of 09 there on the right, 11.9 trillion. So during the same time, we had all these QEs. The national debt went from 9.4 to 11.9 trillion. That's $2.5 trillion more. That's a 27% increase in debt. So not only did we get a 28% of GDP push into the economy and made up money, we also increased our debt by 27%. So let's just go back to our $100,000 a year household. Somebody gives you $28,000 and you go borrow another $27,000 and you still can't get things straightened out. So you got $2.5 trillion in debt, 4.7 in QEs at $7.2 trillion. So that's 43% of GDP gets pumped into the economy, and things are still kind of wavering along, right?
Yeah.
So now with all this money pumped into the system, right? Now, bear in mind, globalization is still a thing here, right? So with all this money pumped into the system, it goes out in the economy. And then people wonder why the stock market went up like a rocket ship from 2010, 11, 12, whenever it was that it bottomed, to 2019. Gee, I wonder why. Why did China grow so much during that period of time? I wonder why.
All right.
Because all that money that got put out there got in the economy, got spent, and we weren't making anything here in the old US of A anymore.
Nope.
Right? So, yeah, so this is the upshot of it, right? So that's how bad the system got, that it took all this, and it still took us let's look at it from the stock market standpoint. It took from 2008, 7 at the peak, took to like 2013 to get back to break even in the stock market. It takes a long time to get back to there. So
Will Parker says the best course of action of American finances is to feel the pain. Businesses need to fail. Citizens who do not want to work need to be hungry and homeless. And Congress needs to get a healthy dose of chlorine in their pool. Man,
Amen.
Will
Preach it,
Parker
brother.
for president.
That's
Spot
it.
on.
Yep. So there's a lot in there that I completely agree with. Well, in fact, I agree with all of it. The problem is you got to change society to believe the same thing. And society here, you look
I
at
think most of Americans would be okay with this. And I'm talking about 51%.
until it affects them.
Yeah.
Right.
What's that?
Until it affects them.
Yeah, exactly.
And look at COVID. Lots of people were all for the we need to shut this down. What do you mean? I'm not going to get a paycheck. We need a program. Right.
We need some helicopters flying around, dropping money out.
Exactly right. So that's the thing. It's real easy when it's the other people in that pain, right? And
yeah, but I think to his point, it shouldn't be the American way. Has never been. I just live on a government assistance program. It's like no, I'm all about social safety nets. As a Christian, I'm all about a social safety net, and I'm all about faith-based entities that provide those. It doesn't have to be the government. It can be faith-based entities because that's the way that's one of the reasons, as I understand it, that we gave them, you don't pay any taxes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Not a problem, because you can do good things with that money instead of paying taxes. Now, are you doing good things with that money? And
right.
But to just say, I'm the third generation that's living on a check is unacceptable.
I agree. Well, and I'm stealing a line from Rush Limbaugh back in the day and paraphrasing a little bit. His line was, too many people are using the safety net as a hammock.
Ooh, I love that.
And I'll add in the safety net should be a trampoline to bounce off of.
Bingo.
But correct. Too many people are using it as a hammock.
Yeah. And I see these, there's videos out there. One I saw recently, which caused me to throw up in my mouth, there was 2 biological women who had transitioned to males. And one of them was talking about how she was disabled and required the other one to get assistance too, so that person could be her full-time caregiver. And they were just making a mockery of it. They were laughing and, oh yeah, we have to do this and that. And none of us have worked in 5 years. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm supposed to subsidize this.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be the angry old man because it's uncomfortable, but my God, man.
Yeah, but the thing is, once you know enough, you start to understand why really old people, like looking back at our youth, why are they so angry? Yeah, because they've seen enough to be angry.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's like, I everybody else is out here and we rise and grind and we get it done. And then there are people that are laying in the hammock that I've provided, that the government's provided for them with my freaking money.
Yep.
It's disgusting. Sorry. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah. I get all kinds of upset about it.
So your data took us up to 2019 and then something happened in 2020.
Oh, it was kind of quiet, wasn't it?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I remember the summer of love, but I don't know what happened.
Yeah. So now let's talk about COVID. Now it's the same but different in that it wasn't caused by a banking crisis. It was obviously self-induced, if you will, from the shutdown standpoint. That was a choice.
Yeah. Right.
And unfortunately, my formatting got goofed up here somehow. So this is COVID Money Tracker. This is an independent website. So this is how much got spent on COVID stuff. So essentially, 0.9 trillion, 900 billion on administrative stuff. Legislative actions, meaning the money came from Congress, 5.9 trillion, and Federal Reserve, 4.7 trillion. You'll notice I only added up what was actually spent, not how much was allocated. You'll notice the Federal Reserve actually allocated 7.2 trillion there.
Wow.
So it could have been a lot more, which would have also meant the inflation would have been that much worse.
Yeah.
All right. So if we add up 0.9, 5.9, and 4.7, we get $11.5 trillion.
That was the COVID response. That
was the COVID response.
Whoa.
That's 60% more than all the QEs and increased debt from the GFC combined.
Jesus.
Gee, I wonder why inflation went to 9%. So you got all the QEs and all that stuff from the GFC, and then we did 60% more than that. And I remember how quiet it was out, even driving around up here in the middle of Wisconsin
Mhm,
during the GFC, during the depths of it.
mhm.
Now, obviously, COVID was quieter because everything was shut down other than essential, and that's a whole nother rant, probably for a cocktail night, right? But it wasn't like during the GFC, it was just a little slowdown, but they had to throw 60% more at it. And of course, we also know none of the QEs, with the exception of Bush's $1,200 stimmy check that you referenced earlier, which I didn't include in that,
Mhm.
those other numbers, all that stuff went to institutions of one sort or another.
Hmm.
COVID, remember, you got stimmy checks.
Mhm.
So it went straight to the people because the banks weren't always doing what the Federal Reserve and the government wanted them to do. They were putting well over half of it into the stock market instead of lending it out.
And as we've
And
talked in previous shows, Will, those of the stimmy checks that were supposed to go to stimulate the economy,
mhm,
50% of it went to pay down consumer debt,
yep,
correct?
it did. And
So
I would argue 100% of it eventually wound up in the economy because credit card balances, as we've talked about, are back to record highs.
mhm.
So they paid that debt down and then built that debt back up. So through a filter and some time, I think you can make the argument that 100% of the stimmy checks wound up in the economy.
Fair enough. And I'm really reticent to call out the government for shutting the economy down. I really am, because I think it's the trolley dilemma, that
Hmm.
there's a train and it goes into
Hmm.
a tunnel, and there's three people on this track, and there's five or maybe an unknown number, so
Hmm.
which the train is speeding, you can leverage it
Hmm.
and save two people by letting it kill three. And
Hmm.
I think that's kind of what they were confronted with, but
Yep.
they didn't. There was going to be damage done either way. And if you
Hmm.
look at the initial data provided by the CDC here in the US and the
Hmm.
CDC in China and the World Health Organization, the data coming out was somewhat apocalyptic.
Yep.
So they were damned if they do, damned if they don't. So there was a response to that. Should it have been 11.5 trillion? I think that was your number.
It was 11. Yeah.
I don't know, man, but they had to do something.
Well, and I'll be the first to admit when they did the 2 week shutdown, I was in favor of it.
Me too. Flat
And
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 clear.
there was no, like I say, based on that, I mean, that's when you and I really started talking directly about
Yeah.
stuff. And the problem was, in my mind, looking back on it now, this is the benefit of hindsight, right?
Mhm.
The That 2 week shutdown, if there had not been all the stimmy and all the incentives to individuals and businesses to keep the crisis going, so to speak,
Mhm.
I think it would have, if they would have done the 2 weeks and then, I don't know, I'm making this up, guys. Then another 4 weeks with like a small stimmy, and then we're going to get back to it. I mean, who knows? I mean, there's no way of knowing what could have, would have happened. But it completely changed the population, the people's expectation of what will happen when bad things happen in the world.
I agree with you. I agree with it, Will. I think it should have been 2 weeks, and then maybe a reduced workforce, i.e., 50% comes back, or they work some sort of rotating shift. I don't know what that looks like, but 2 weeks became four, four became six. The money
Mhm.
just kept going.
Yep.
Brrr. It's like,
Yep.
no, that was the wrong thing to do. What's Alan
Yep.
say?
It says at his age, which I believe is like 26, it makes his blood boil. Worked hard, provide for his family, to subsidize lazy, inept, and fraudulent people who just don't get it. No work, no help, no free money.
Amen.
The only thing I'll push back a little bit on you, the brothers, they get it just fine. They
What do you mean?
understand the system better than we
Oh,
do,
yeah. Yeah, that's
right?
fact.
They know that, hey, if we make up to X number of dollars, we make above X, then all this other stuff's going to stop. So they'll work up to X minus whatever and then get themselves fired. And then they'll jump on the unemployment train and, all these other, programs. They know the game better than we do because that's how they make their living.
And if you're still on, he has a saying which I love, and I'm gonna butcher it, and maybe he can clean it up for me. But it's something like every system is perfectly designed to produce its outcome.
Yes, absolutely.
Something like that. And
Yep.
it's like that's exactly right. You've
Yep.
created a set of incentives. Don't be mad if somebody are using those
Yeah.
incentives.
Right. Absolutely. This is dated. I'm going to say this is probably 10 years old, if not older. But somebody did a study up here in Wisconsin, and a single mother of two had to go get a job making at least $60,000 a year to equate to what all the welders were making 25 an hour. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is goes back a ways, but I think that the analogy holds true. Well, where's the incentive? I can sit
Right.
around and do nothing, or I can go work really, really hard to make 60
To
and
break
have the
even
same
with
lifestyle. You had to break.
but
I mean, if you take out the what I would argue is a moral, a moral obligation to, work, why?
yeah. I tell you, there's a prison right now that's trying something, and I'm gonna throw this out there. For every book you read and turn in a report, like a handwritten report, not
Mhm.
some chat GPT copy and paste, and then
Right.
you have to sit a board, they'll give you like 4 days off your sentence.
Awesome.
So it's like, okay, you're not just gonna sit on your ass, you're gonna read books.
Yeah.
You do something. You're blind, here's a braille book for you.
Yeah.
Now, and you're not gonna sit on your ass. You're gonna
Yeah.
sit there and do something, man.
Yeah. Well, and we've referenced him before on the show. Patrick Bet David, the
Mhm,
Valuetainment podcast.
mhm,
You know, he came to the country as a young boy from Iran,
mhm.
and as he got older, I remember he said he couldn't believe that somebody like, say, a Ray Dalio, because that jumped into my head. I can't believe that for 15 or $20, I can go buy a book with this person's insights and I can learn from their experience. And boy, that really changed my view of reading books like that, because it's like, you mean for $20 I can go find out what Ray Dalio, one of the most successful investors ever, thinks about X, Y, and Z? But here, take my money.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I think higher education is doomed.
Hmm.
And for some, you know, for better or worse, it's probably a good thing because the accumulated intelligence of so many great people is out there for the taking at the cost of a library, book.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
So
not even the cost. Go down the public library.
yeah, that's
You
that's what
know?
I mean. Which cost is
Yeah.
zero. Go to the
Right.
library.
Exactly. So, all right. So let's get a look at this here. So also during all the stimmy checks and all that stuff, um, our national debt, there's a little change in it during that period of time, brother. And I cobbled together two charts here to make it work here with the numbers on there. So Q1 of 2020. So right at the beginning of COVID, we had $23 trillion in national debt.
Mhm.
Q4 of 24, which is the latest number that's out right now on the Federal Reserve's website, is $36 trillion in debt. So that's a $13 trillion increase in debt. It's 56%, brother.
My God.
56% in 4 years.
And if you're tracking this, we went from 4-ish% 20
Uh
years
huh.
ago to
Yep. Up, 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 up. Okay.
where's the
So
tipping point though?
whenever people stop buying it,
The faith is gone.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we added $13 trillion in debt into uh, a $20.9 trillion economy. That was the GDP in 2019. So our debt went up by 62% of GDP. So this
Mhm.
would be equivalent of your $100,000 household taking on a $62,000 debt for a non-appreciating asset.
Oof.
So a $62,000 car, right?
Mhm.
So let's look at this. The total for the GFC was 43% of GDP. The national debt went up 62% of GDP. So it's 50% more.
Mm.
Now, if you think about this from a business standpoint, if we have $1 million a year business and we invest $100,000, we want to get more than $100,000 of increased business out of that 100 grand, right?
Mhm.
Well, we increased our national debt by 62% of GDP. But during that same period of time, we only got a 12.5% increase in GDP.
Mm.
So we're at the point of diminishing returns. We're getting less for more.
Yeah.
That is the beginning of the end. Now, how far does it go? I don't know. Nobody knows. But
But
this
there
is
ain't at this point. There's no turning back. And that's
correct.
why since we've been doing this, if you read the titles, my description as to what we're doing here is the end of the American Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a matter of when, how bad, until somebody comes along that can take over, just like it went from Britain to us at the end of World War II, until another country comes along that can take over, it'll continue to be this system.
Yeah.
So a part of this is also preparing because we have children, you have a grandchild. If we have this knowledge and we can pass it on to those folks, then they can have better lives. Kind of like that. And I'm not equating me, you, us, anybody else to Ray Dalio here. Okay. But in the analogy, we can buy his experience for $20, right?
Yeah.
Passing this information on to our kids so they can pass it on to their kids and so on, so they can have better lives. To me, otherwise, what's the point? Why have this experience? Why do all this studying to just sit there and talk about football or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Pass this stuff on to them. And then once they got this, then you can talk about football or cars or what have you, right? And I'm all for talking about that stuff and, enjoying that family time, but pass this stuff on so they can have better lives.
Yeah, we got a bigger problem right now.
Exactly. So, to sum up, this shows us that each intervention must be larger, and it's gone exponentially larger. So, what's my say?
Says it's a good thing you guys don't write children's books. Toddlers will be riding their big wheels off a mound.
And you have to be a certain age to even know what a big wheel is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's Ted asked there?
Can the USA avoid a string man taking, I think it means a strong man taking power, see so much of the constitutional republic diminished? Are we even a republic?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, some would argue, and I'm not arguing one way or the other. I'm just saying some people argue Trump is that guy. Right? I mean, look at the executive orders. In fairness, I voted for him 3 times, full disclosure, but look at the executive orders, right? And we can look at the exponential growth by president of executive orders, just gone up, up, and up, right? So that's the same sort of exponential growth, and people are looking to one person to be the guy that saves things. The last one where it was on the left, where it was the quote unquote Messiah, was Obama, right? And now on the right, it's Trump. Can do no wrong, rationalize anything and everything, right? I mean, how many times did Trump promise to publish the Epstein list? I ain't
Still
seen
waiting.
it yet.
Still waiting. Cash and Don Bongino. Now they're saying, nah, he killed himself. I'm like, oh no, have you been co-opted? Did somebody show you the Zapruder film from a different angle? And now you're like, oh crap.
Yep. Well, and and Trump, and if I'm wrong about this, somebody tell me. Trump about the JFK files. He promised in his first term, he promised to release those. Then he said, after I saw them, I'm not releasing that.
Yeah.
Now that's what he claimed. Who knows what the truth is?
Yeah.
But that's the system, right? And why is the system like this? Humans, right? It is what it is, guys. All right.
We respond to incentives that we say at every single show.
Absolutely. So the system is addicted to cheap and plentiful money, right? That's it all started going downhill. Well, the downhill, we really got going on the downhill slide August 15th of 71, right? When we defaulted on the debt, because that's really what we did.
True.
And so it just takes more and more all the time. And how much will it take next time? More.
Yeah,
that's the answer.
That's the only answer. More.
It's more, right? Yeah. Because if it's less, people will be like, "What do you mean? I only got $200 in stimmy? Vote that guy out of office, right?" So
and then eventually, you're Zimbabwe 2.0.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep. Speaking of that, I actually meant to put those in the show, but I got my Zimbabwe notes over there. I know you've got some. I've got my Roman Demarius coins where you can actually see where the corners got, or the coins got clipped to make more coins.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. So, what's Alan Kelly have to say there, brother?
Higher education only indoctrinates young people on the ideology of their so-called professors. Upon the student's graduation, they are basically useless. The woke generation just keeps increasing. We as parents need to direct our children with morals, ethics, and incentives for honesty and gratitude toward others.
Yeah.
Hear, hear, sir.
And it's um my twins just graduated high school this last week, and I ran across a
Congratulations.
video. Thank you. They get their intelligence from their mother. Um, the ran across this video that had popped up last year, and they've tracked valedictorians from high school for 20 years in this study, and they found that they it's not they did bad, but they didn't do as good as they didn't become the entrepreneurs, the game changers. Many of the valedictorians were very successful, went into law, accounting,
Mhm.
finance, business, whatever it might be. But the people who changed the world, your Elon Musks, if you will, rarely got good grades, because
Mhm.
good grades, for the most part, are people who can conform, fit in the box, right? And the world needs people like that. No two ways about it. Okay.
Mhm.
Not knocking that in the least. But your game changers are usually the people who barely graduate high school, don't fit in the box, willing to take risks, all those things.
When they
So,
ask why over and over again and piss the teachers off.
yeah,
Why? Why are we doing it that way?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
we just not shut up and sit down and get your crayon out.
Yeah. So we need a mix of people for
Mhm.
sure. Um, so let's talk about some what are some likely outcomes here? Well, that'll be the next show.
Yeah.
And what we do, right?
Yeah.
So some likely outcomes are it's going to be more next time, which is more money printed, which is going to cause more national debt because it's going to go together, right?
More inflation.
Bingo, more inflation. How do you protect yourself from inflation, Rich? Well, I'm glad I pretended you asked because that's show number 4. Because
Looking forward to it.
that's where we're gonna go with this is how do we protect ourselves? Because all this knowledge in these first 3 parts is all gee whiz information if we don't do something with it.
Mhm.
And this is where I really value doing the show because it's forced me to go back and look. And in the last week and a half that I've really been putting this show together in my brain, I've sat there and went, oh my God, that's why that happened. That's
Mm.
why I didn't do better because I didn't understand this part of it. And
Mm.
I understand it now. And I don't mean to sound morbid. I'm looking forward to the next downturn
You're gonna
because
make some money.
yeah, exactly. I'm gonna make you're gonna make some money, but I'm gonna make a better life for my family
Hmm. Good point.
because I've I I've got a better understanding of how the system works that I did not possess before. If I understood the system better in 2008, I'd probably be retired now, but I
But
didn't.
and no disrespect, but it
Mhm.
sounds like, now I figured out how the buffet line on the Titanic works, and I get to
Yeah,
go to the head of the line now. And it's like, yeah,
yeah,
but you're on the freaking Titanic.
right.
Now, where else could we be right now? I mean, we're still in the best place to be,
Mhm.
but it won't always be that way, whether
Right.
that's 5 years or 50 years from now. At some point, this is a math problem and it's going to tip at
Yes.
some point. Hopefully, not in our lifetimes, but I think most definitely in our children's lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. And
Yeah.
when that tipping happens, it's going to be very scary because the whole, just like the end of World War II, the whole world system
Mhm.
changed, right?
Absolutely.
And you know, we look back at the GFC now, and I tend to think of it as a short period of time. It
Mhm.
wasn't. It played out over 4 or 5
That's a great
years,
point. Yeah,
right?
sure did.
So that's where I got caught on the COVID side. I wasn't I didn't wasn't patient enough to let things play out.
Mm.
So, um, so I that patient part is I always think things are going to happen faster than they do, whether it's the where the peak happens at,
Mhm.
right? And also how long it takes to bottom and for things to grow back.
Mm.
So it's hard to sit back and wait for that stuff when there's so much handwriting on the walls. It's like, how can this not happen faster?
True.
Well, the system fights it every bit of the way.
Yes.
So that patience is key, and we're going to talk a little bit about that next week when we talk about strategies to build a better life out of this. So,
Yeah.
What's this one say on the way out, brother?
Your next level won't meet you in your comfort zone. The next show will push you out of your comfort zone. Looking forward to it, my friend.
Yep. It's going to push, it pushes me out of mine too, just as I'm sitting here thinking about it, because it's going to take some faith and hopefully, in my case, I'll say for sure, a better understanding of how things work within the system and how to best protect yourself and your family within that monetary system that we economic system we have out here.
And with that, we'll see you next Monday.
Yep. For more sunshine.
That's right. You want to take us out, brother?
I'd love to. The fight's coming. Be ready.